today's topic is focused around resilient hubs, which I think is this is kind of how the conversation between Cooperation Humboldt and HUUF got started, is centered around this idea of HUUF as a resilient hub in the community and what that means. And so, yeah, we'll get started. I am going to share the screen. All right. Is everyone able to see? Okay, is everyone able to see the presentation good?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so becoming a resilient hub. What does that mean? So what is a resilient hub? Well, resilient hub can be a lot of different things, and what exactly it is depends on the community and it depends on the space. But typically resilient hubs are trusted community centers and spaces that serve as a gathering place to distribute resources, exchange information, express community care during disasters. But outside of times of disasters, they kind of focus on shifting the power to the community, providing services and programmings year round, and using their space to support permaculture-inspired climate solutions. So things like that, things that really bring something to a community and shift the power to neighborhoods and residents, and supporting them to meet their needs and their own needs and practice self-determination. And like I said, ideally every space is a resilient hub in some way, because it's really just about being there for your community. So what do resilient hubs do? Well, there's three identified kind of areas of a resilient hub, and that's building community, having regenerative ecological features like within the structure, and then disaster preparedness and response. And what does that mean exactly? So building community. Yeah, so outside of times of disaster, resilient hubs really bring people together. You know, that can look differently for each organization, but it could look at things like programming for community members. So just like what's going on right now, the way that HUUF is offering workshops for its members and community to come and learn about different topics. Could be things like anti-racism workshops, conflict resolution, anything that can help build and strengthen and grow a community. It can be skill shares. I know that before COVID, there was a lot of talk around like providing skill shares and offering those types of resources for people. And then just working with community members to help organize projects, garden days, disaster workshops, and it really requires the community to come together and give input on what it is that they're in need of. And I think that that's really important, is having that strong connection and communication with your community, so that you are offering things that are of value to the people in which you are serving. All right. Regenerative ecological features. So things like rainwater catchments, edible landscaping, toxic free paints, anything that's just taking your actual infrastructure to a more ecological friendly level, because the idea is that these resilient hubs are kind of acting as a like a model for the community of ways that people can replicate these methods and kind of bring them into their lives. And so by acting as like a leader in these features, resilient hubs can inspire community members and other organizations. Things like solar panels too, which I think I've heard that HUUF has solar panels or was planning on.
Yeah, double pane windows, solar panels. We have charging for electric cars. We have bike racks.
Oh wow. So yeah, you're a lot of this is going to be information then that you've probably already thought about as an organization. So and then disaster preparedness and response. This is huge. So during times of disaster, resilient hubs can play different roles depending on like what their resources are. So I know like during the fires, a lot of people got displaced, and we went to a community in, I think it was Hayfork, and there was like a church that one was taking in donations, one was acting as the community kitchen, one was acting as as a shelter. So different organizations will take on different roles during the time of disaster. And yeah, that could look like things like I said, providing shelter, being the community kitchen, maybe a space where everyone comes to gather. You know that to go to HUUF, for example, when when everything goes wrong, that there will be someone there to help with. Maybe if you have solar panels, you're providing charging stations, something like that. So yeah, so really thinking about what is a place do during times of disaster. And now, just like it was mentioned before, in the middle of a storm when the power might go out, things like this are on our minds. So so yeah, some examples of resilient hubs in the community. I'm sure y'all are familiar with the Blue Lake Rancheria. This is obviously a big example. It's more than a resilient hub because they really have like a lot of infrastructure in place. I know that they have, sustainability and resilience goals. They have solar panels on their infrastructure. They have electric vehicles and electrical vehicle charging on site. And I know that they even have like an entire microgrid in their area. During the power outages last year, they were like one of the spaces that was fine throughout the whole thing. They have they have like a lot of food programs. They have lunch, daily lunch for tribal elders, meal delivery, student meal programs, and a community garden that they get all that food that they use in those programs, they get from their community garden. They do emergency weather shelter meals and meals for their parks and recreation programs. They also offer the Resilience Training and Innovation Center through the Office of Emergency Services, where they will post trainings on their website to build resilience. And so they teach emergency preparedness skills, clean energy skills, infrastructure development skills, economic development and recovery, community planning. And so, yeah, they offer those to their community in a way to build, in an effort to build resilient skills. Another example is, because again, Blue Lake Rancheria, it's a huge space. They have a lot of things going on there. Here's kind of just a smaller example of an elementary school that has, they specifically have like a school garden where they have a chicken coop made of cob. They have fruit trees. They have frequent work parties with community members and students, which I'm sure was more of a post-COVID thing or pre-COVID, once COVID is over type thing. And they have a lot of community partnerships, which is a huge component of Resilient Hubs too, is building those relationships with other organizations that have like a shared vision around this. And so, yeah, let's just pause for a minute and like think, after hearing that, some examples of both resilient hubs in the community or ways in which your organization is already acting as a resilient hub. You had kind of mentioned some things, Joanna, and so I'm curious what else y'all are doing that you feel classifies or would help you feel like a resilient hub.
Well, we have a climate action committee. And they're working on getting, instead of replacing one of our gas heaters with, using the solar energy to, I can't remember what it's called, but it comes from solar energy. Yeah. So we're going to replace one of our gas heaters with that.
Wow. So yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of infrastructure things. I also remember hearing talk about like a community garden that you've had in the past, and the possibility of getting that going again if you could find someone who's dedicated. I'm curious about so I know that obviously like I'm here, so this is an offering that you are offering your community, but I'm wondering what other kinds of like workshops or skill shares you have hosted in the past, or what you're currently offering.
Well, we've had a tiny house workshop a couple years ago.
Wow.
And then we've had electric car time when everybody brought their electric cars. And what else? Well, we would have auctions and people would bring plants to be auctioned off from their gardens. You know, lots of different things.
Cool.
I had a question. Just, do you mind if I just jump in for a sec? So just about because I've only been at HUUF for about 1.5 years now. So I'm just curious, Joanna and Eve, just what has been our response in the past when there's been some kind of I mean, like, have we made use of the kitchen? Or, I mean, I'm just wondering when people, you know, when forest fires or when people have needed, just what our community outreach response has been when there's been some kind of a disaster outside of,
I
yeah.
think because none of the disasters were right real close in our community, they were kind of outlying, you know, a distance from us, that we have not been called upon to do anything in that regard. We did agree to become a place where homeless on very, very cold winter days, you know, could come and take shelter. But
That was with
so far,
Arcata House.
so far, since we're so out of the way and it would require transportation for people, that hasn't been utilized. And you know, our climate is milder than a lot of places too, which I think is part of why it hasn't been utilized. But aside from that, I don't know what we've done to be a shelter. Oh, wait a minute. We our what is it called, Joanna or Amy? We decided that if there were immigration issues, that we would be a refuge community or something.
Well, we have in the past, and this is before I was there, this was in the
Right.
80s, and we helped a family, a father and 2 daughters, I believe. You know, it was during this in the 80s when it was, what was it? Someone, you know, the American government was sending people down there, and it was a real mess. And so we got, I think they were from Costa Rica. Anyways, they came and we didn't have them in we got them an apartment and we supported them. You know, so that was one way. This is before my time. This is in the 80s, you know, so we have done that in the past and we're really proud and we really would like to do that again. You know, we've talked about that, how we could do that again, that we would be a place where, because other UUs like in the Midwest, they are hiding people with immigration issues that, and I've been to things when we have, this is pre-pandemic, and we went to workshops and heard from other UU places where they were actually hiding an immigrant in their church, you know, from ICE. And
hopefully with our newly elected regime, a lot of those restrictions will be changed. I'm not sure how, but I have hope in that regard. That Biden has done some things, has signed some bills, but there's still a lot to be done.
yeah.
I'm curious.
I wasn't sure what our history was in that regard.
I'm curious about what you mentioned around being a shelter for homeless during very severe cold weather.
Right.
Well, Arcata House was going to offer us that they would they would get the people, they would feed them, they would have clothes and everything, you know, warm clothes and everything. They would bring them over to HUUF, and then we would just provide a couple people to stay in the building at night in case something happened. And but that was during, you know, like a storm like this that would happen, you know, but it never, I don't think we ever followed through. I think maybe our neighbor really had a stink and wrote the board a letter about it and stuff
True
like that.
too.
So that's not something that is like a current offer that's on the table, just because we actually do work with the homeless population. So it's good to know resources in the community.
I think the offer is still on the table, but I don't know about any current decisions. Amy, you would probably know more about that, right?
Yeah, I think just, so we had a situation, not to derail us too much, where we had one
Oh,
one
yeah.
homeless man that we hadn't offered him a place to live. I think he was camping on the property.
Yes, he was.
We had helped him out and gave him access to the building during the day, and that relationship kind of soured significantly. So, and it did have several complaints from our immediate neighbors, his presence. So unfortunately, yeah, we have not really, that kind of gate has been closed a bit at this moment in time, just because of some recent events and those not, yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, that's not the case at the moment.
And also
Okay.
because we don't have a shower, we, according to the county, we can't really have anybody stay overnight, because we don't have a shower in our bathroom. Though I've heard of other churches like in Reno, Nevada, they got a grant and they put a shower in one of their bathrooms, so they could do that, Yeah.
Mhm.
It's great to go to these regional stuff where you can talk to other churches and UU churches and see what they're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks for that.
Well, cool. I mean, yeah, it sounds like there's like clearly your organization has already put a lot of thought into these things, and so that's really great. And it would just be a matter of this point just brainstorming what, like, really taking inventory of what you were doing, and then compiling it in a way that is more accessible to the community, I guess, or more evident. So like that's kind of the idea of like this, of everything that we're presenting throughout these 6 weeks, is like finding a way to really gather the information and get it out there to the community, and so everyone's kind of aware of who's doing what and what is available. So
Unfortunately, our building is basically closed right now, so.
yeah, that, I think that's the case for,
I mean, some of it, I have a key, quite a few of us have keys into the building. We can get in the building, but, we can't just act on our own. We have to get, work with the board, or when we have a fellowship meeting, we can bring things up and talk in those meetings. Once a quarter, we have a fellowship meeting.
Yeah.
So after the service.
Gotcha. Okay, well, and can you hear me? Just said
Yes.
my internet stable. Okay, I'm not sure. How do you start a resilient hub? So I mean, this process again is going to look different for everyone. This kind of is going off of, the very beginning stages. You already have kind of a team and a location, because those would be the first steps, is really finding the group of people who's dedicated, really finding that place that would make the perfect spot. And then, yeah, community outreach, getting the word out there, really deciding what it is you want to offer the community. And then engaging the community and developing partnerships with other organizations who are doing similar work, creating plans and then implementing those plans, and then always learning and improving from what you're currently doing. There's always space to grow and develop and change as the needs of the community change as well. So yeah, the first stage is assembling a team. It sounds like your organization has a team around this type of work already. Is that accurate? That kind of like specifically focuses on like these types of things?
About resilience and be ready for the disaster.
Yeah, or just like resilience, or like no, not specific to disaster.
I don't really remember. I don't know.
That would be a good
I think
discussion at some point.
I think we have some areas that we could improve upon. Yeah, we do have an active climate action committee. We do have a grounds committee that, you know, does a really good job of getting together and tending to the kind of flora and fauna, but there's a lot of room for, you know, like we don't have, you know, a food forest or community garden, and there is space for something like that. We have a kitchen committee, right, that talks about, you know, the various ways that we want to use our commercial kitchen. And I think there's definitely places where a lot of this information could get, yeah, implemented more.
I'm curious about the communication between all these committees that you like. It sounds like there's a committee, like a committee around a lot of different things. Is there like a lot of communication between like what they're all doing and like sharing ideas and collaboration?
They meet quarterly. People, the heads of the committees meet quarterly and talk about what they're doing.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you find that a lot of the committees will like the grounds workers and the food people will maybe like collaborate on ideas or anything like that?
I haven't been to one of those meetings in a long time, so.
So I can speak to that. We had our quarterly, so it's the Council of Chairs is what it's called. It's just all the different chairs of the committees getting together every other month. We had our meeting last night. And I would say no, apart from that communication, I mean, you have some overlap, right? Where a few different people are serving on several different committees because they feel called to work in different areas of the congregation. But as far as collaboration and seeing how, yeah, I feel like we could do a lot that not to, you know, speak ill of the very hardworking people, but I feel as far we could really integrate our efforts more effectively, for sure.
Yeah, those from getting involved in this work, I found that like one of the most important components is that collaboration, really working with your partners and touching base and supporting one another, especially in Cooperation Humboldt. We do a lot of different types of programs and projects, but they like there's the food team, the care and wellness team, the disaster team, but they all end up cross-pollinating at times because it's also interrelated, you know. So yeah, getting started. So assembling that team, like it sounds like you have several committees, and that's good. So you already have like people within your organization who are committed to taking some type of leadership role and getting involved in some way that inspires them. And so, so that's good. And then picking a location, well, you already have your location. And yeah, and I'm curious about like the relationship between like HUUF and the community. Like, is it pretty much just like the members of the church are your community, or do you find that like you are in collaboration or communication with like anyone in the Bayside area, or how does that really look?
Well, the worship committee who plans all the services, they definitely are working with people from outside of HUUF. Many times, you know, we have was it last week? We had a minister from Austin, Texas, and she was so powerful. She was amazing. And that was an amazing service. And she talked about her living in her neighborhood where she was really close to her neighbors and they did things together and stuff like that. I mean, she was just really powerful. I really loved her. So yeah, and so we do that. We the worship committee especially, and then if that is sort of the minister's job, and we don't have a minister right now who really reaches out to the community, you know, all the other ministers and, you know, other people. And yeah, so, but the worship committee basically really goes out. And as we've talked about before, we used to have a brunch once a Sunday where we, all the money we collected during the service went to a nonprofit we were supporting. So yeah, but that's not happening now, except for a few key ones that, you know, like Betty Chen and Arcata House.
Arcata House and the little girl in Nicaragua. And we are going to do something to try, I think in March, once again, to raise money for food for people, just because it is such a great need. We've made no commitment to them, but it's something I feel we need to do.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, that's great. And so that does kind of tie us into this next step, which is community outreach. So who in the organization is going to be involved in the process? Who in the community is going to be involved in the process? How do you communicate with your network?
Well, we have a social action committee, which, and then that is who is, does a lot of that work, talking about who we're going to support,
Okay.
And, but we can't act on our own. We have to get, the whole fellowship behind us, what we're doing. So that's when we have our meetings, and if anything comes up, we can talk about it then.
Gotcha. So like when you're coming up with ideas for what to offer, who to help, what to do next, like how do you get those ideas? Do you involve community input? Is it something that the committees get together and discuss, or like how do you get an idea of what it is that you want?
You would go to the board, and because the presidents are going to lead this meeting. So you say, I want to talk about this at the meeting, or something like that.
We used to have a lot of community input, and
Yeah.
different committee input, and exchange pre-COVID. Everything has changed, of course, and until we all get inoculated, or until we get past some of this. But we did do a whole lot more. I know being on the Social Action Committee, occasionally people from the community would come and present different issues, and we would all, see what we could do to resolve.
Gotcha. So you did create a space where community members could come forward and like offer up ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would meet in the hall after service, and anybody that wanted to come could come. But, that's pre-pandemic. We're not meeting there anymore.
Gotcha. I understand that.
Sabrina, I'm curious if you could just give us a very small idea, just from Cooperation Humboldt's point. I mean, because you guys seem like you do such a tremendous job of making your presence and your invitations known to the larger community. Like, I mean, even people that aren't directly involved with you guys, it seems like they've heard of you, they have some sense of what you're doing, or some recognition of some program. Like, what do you feel like are your main vehicles for getting invites and word out to the larger community?
Right. That's a great question. Oscar, too, if you have any insight on this as well, I would welcome your input, because there are a lot of ways that we go about this, and what that looks like depends on the team. I know that we try to have like a strong social media presence on Facebook and Instagram, and we try to document like if we do a food drive, we try to like take photos and post a picture of the food drives, and then mention all the partners that were included in it. Maybe like if we like recently we collaborated with Safeway and stuff, and so we'll post that. For our projects, a big thing we do, and like how we generate community input on like project design, is what we do is we kind of identify a community that we're interested in, like in reaching out to, and then we'll look at organizations that are working specifically with the individuals within the community. We'll develop that relationship with the organization. Then we'll ask the organization to connect us to individuals that they serve. And then what we'll do is we'll actually create a space where we can conduct what we call empathy interviews, and we'll have just a discussion about this person's experience, like what their needs are, where the gaps in the services that they receive are, like what could we offer to you, what I mean, things like that. So we really try to develop like personal relationships with people in that way. And then I know that the social media and the brochures, and Oscar, if you have anything to add there.
Amy, I just want to highlight how important that question that you asked is. And I want to answer it in a simple way. And it's just, every person in this community has interests. Like they have their own unique set of interests. And so we don't invite people saying, here, come be interested in us. We invite people and we say, come be interested in this niche centered activity, whether it be gardening, whether it be volunteering for, you know, something that people are interested in, a cause. So we don't focus on us, our name, our brand. That's not what's important to us. What's important to us is the interest of the community and how we can allow them to engage and express. And so when people feel like they have that outlet, then they're like, oh, this work ties to a solidarity economy. Can I learn more about that? Like, I would like to learn more about that now that I'm a building block in it. And so allowing people to feel like have a space to be creative, to express, to share. And obviously there's limitations due to COVID, but even this last year, we were able to do a mini garden extravaganza. Everyone was social distancing, everyone was wearing masks, and we got volunteers to drive in their own vehicles to separate locations to come together, collaborate, and get something done. Together, at the end of it, we were able to plant over 100 mini garden installations.
That is amazing, yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, I just relationships is a big thing. We really like to like check in with a lot of people, not even with an intention necessarily, but just to see like what people are doing, and then like let them know what we're doing, and if whatever those services or projects could be of need to them, that we're there, you know.
I think the next thing should be, you know, for people to collect the water from their roof, you know, that I think that would be a really good thing to try to get help people get, because, you know, that's what we need, because when a disaster happens, that's what I think is the one thing. How are you going to store enough water? You know,
Water catchment is a great idea, and we certainly get enough of it here. Well, we do when it's the rainy season, that is.
yeah, I mean, I've got 500 gallons right now.
That's a big part of this whole like overall project is just that, like reaching out to really identifying where the resources in the community are, whether it be an individual or an organization. And obviously with consent, like making that something that is accessible to the broader community so people know where they can go for this, where they can go for that, you know. And so that's why like having these types of conversations are so important. And also like helping other organizations think about these things as well. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you both for that response. I just, you know, from my perspective, I've lived in Humboldt County for almost 20 years for the most part, and I'd never even heard of HUUF until just a few years ago. So, and it's a, you know, lovely organization and beautiful people, and there's a part of me that's like, yeah, I wonder if there's more we could do to be a presence and, you know, a bigger invite into the larger community. So
right, because it sounds like you are all doing so much, and like at the very least, I feel like you could be an inspiration or a model for other organizations that want to replicate what you've already done. Because you just will keep you'll say something that's like, oh, we're doing this and this. And I'm just like, well, you guys are doing everything. Why are you even here? You know? And so, but honestly, like there's so many organizations that like there's clearly was a process that led to you being able to do this and being able to come to a consensus to organize all this. And I think that organizations like HUUF could be an inspiration and a guide and like a leader for others that want to do something like this, because yeah, like why is it not known that you are doing, like why is it not known that you are doing all this amazing stuff that should be knowledge that the whole community has access to, because it's great work that you're doing. So yeah, so like going back to the steps in the community resilient hubs is offerings. So thinking about specifically related to infrastructure, like assessing the spaces, and this is, you know, if you're trying to think of maybe saying for an organization that doesn't have any of these things yet, like really assessing your structure and thinking about what can be used, what additions you want to make, or what you can utilize with the space that's already there. So for example, like if you have a commercial kitchen, during wildfire season, they were Food for People or Salvation Army, I think it was running a program where they cooked a bunch of meals and had it delivered. We had coordinated with volunteers to deliver all those meals to people who were staying at hotels because they were evacuated. So if you have a commercial kitchen, is that something that you coordinate meal deliveries or like large scale meal production? If you have an open gym, could you possibly be a shelter during, a tsunami season or thank goodness that's not a season, but a tsunami. And then, during, not COVID times, do you have space for gathering, for meetings or workshops? Do you have gardens?
Totally. I mean, pre-COVID, we had all types of people in the community using our space. There was a space for these groups for kids, and they would, I don't know exactly what, it was a kid thing. I know that they're there. We had and so many things, so many things. People use the building, it was amazing.
That's really important too, to know that. And eventually
the Sufis used it, all types of people used it.
Veterans for Peace used it. There was children's yoga. There was men's groups, women's groups, all sorts of, yeah.
Yeah, lots of things. Have been lots of ways to use it. We had weddings there. We had all types
workshops, retreats.
Yeah, workshops, wow. And we had like a women's retreat there, and yeah, we had so much going on,
yeah.
We would have drumming circles outside on the patio, and moon things with drumming circles, and we had a lot of pagan things where we would do all the 8 times of the pagan, and we were just yeah.
By the way, I love that commercial kitchen picture, whoever got it. It's a great.
Yeah, I threw that one in there for some laughs. I thought that was
oh, it's great.
I'm glad you appreciated it. Who would organize all these all these offerings? Was that
just different people in the fellowship,
Okay.
Yeah, just different people. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
Oh, and then we had a fantastic Halloween celebration, mostly every year.
Yeah, the kids love it. Well, so we have skits. We use our whole property, and we set different people in the fellowship sign up to do skits, and then people sign up to lead the people around. Because you take one, so it's just one adult with a little light, a little candle thing, and a little pumpkin, and you take about 12 or 15 people with their children and their parents, and you take them to the first, you don't talk at all, you take them to the first one, and then tell them to sit down, you go to the next one, you go all around the property, and there might be 8 or 10 skits. And I just remember so many great skits, just amazing.
Renaissance fair style with little pavilions and lots of cupcakes, and at the end.
At the end, there's cupcakes and juice and maybe even pizza and stuff like that, And but the Halloween, we've been doing it for like 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know how many years, but that's one thing that the whole community loves, to bring their kids to our Halloween event.
That sounds, well, I can't wait until, I know what I'm doing in the next Halloween that we're allowed to gather for sure. So yeah, that kind of goes on our next slide, which was, oops. Oh, wait. No. I think I got some of the slides mixed up. Anyways, so I'm curious what you've mentioned, solar panels, you mentioned electric cars and charging stations. Do you have any other resilient type infrastructure like that? And I'm also curious if you have a space like a commercial kitchen or an open gym or things.
We have a commercial kitchen.
Okay.
Yes. But I don't know how it's, again, the building is closed, so yeah.
Gotcha. And then Do you have a rainwater catchment system, or is that something?
No, we don't, but I think that would be a very good idea to get that going, and then we could actually have people come and look at it there, and you know, it'd be really good to get it done. Like I just got it done, you know, it's not that hard to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't have to be an unsightly thing on the property. It can be put in some area that doesn't obscure other views, and you can grow wonderful vines on it, like passion fruit vines or other vines, maybe some fruit vines.
And what would be the process of, say, like today we decided, yes, we want a rainwater catchment system at HUUF. What would be the process of actually implementing that?
Well,
You
you
have
have,
filter
what
pump
I've learned from having a rainwater, you need to, I found out about this thing, I think it's called first need or something. And what it does, when you're building it, you have another, like a 4-inch pipe that the water comes through there first, because when it comes off the roof, it's pretty dirty, you know? And so you have to have a filter there, and that's what it is. It has a ball in the pipe, and, you know, and then you can let that water out and have a 5-gallon bucket beneath that. And so that's something you have to buy. And I learned about it and bought. So when we built my system, that's what we did. And then I have it on a big platform. So we built this really, really strong platform that could hold 500 gallons, you know. So
What would be the process though? Like I meant more on like a logistical like process within your organization. Like if you wanted to bring
somebody would have to say they wanted to do it. And then you'd have to have 3 people who would look into what it would cost. And, you know, that's the thing we learned, the 3 people thing. So that you always have somebody to be a leader. And if somebody has an emergency or whatever, it's good to have 3 people. And then they would make a presentation to the board, and they would say yes or no, you know, but we'd have to do the cost because we have a budget. You know, where would it go in the budget? It doesn't cost very much. I think I got these 2 totes, and I think they were $125 each. And then the first need thing, but so it's not very expensive, you know, to do, but you have to get the structure to put it on, and the tote, you know, the 225-gallon totes, and which are, you know, around here, the beer people use them, and, you know, they're not hard to get.
So you do have a process in place of like bringing something forward, bringing forward an idea, and everyone's aware of that. That process is made clear to everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Especially our past minister, Brian, he's the one that started the 3 people thing, you know. You ought to have 3 people, you know. So we all know that.
I think if somebody just brought the idea up before the board and it was discussed, and the congregation decided they wanted to do it, then we could actually start from there. There's a lot of different approaches. It's just a matter of figuring out who's going to be hired to do it, and, you know, what are we going to do with funds and such. And then, you know, talking to, I know there are big tanks. A lot of people rurally that have cattle and other types of ranches, the big tanks are out there. If you drive up 101, out there somewhere around the KOA campground, there's somebody that sells big water catchment tanks.
We can get them on Craigslist. But anyways, one time, this was a few years ago, we were paying to keep our storage at a storage place, you know, all of our Halloween stuff and all our, you know, and we decided to build a shed next to our building. And it's actually 2 sheds. And this was Bertie really wanted to do it. And you just ask for the fellowship, who can give money for this, you know, who can come and put it together. And we just do it that way, you know, because, you know, we have a budget. And so for any thing like that's going to cost a couple $1,000, somebody has to come up and say, I'll give the money to have it happen. And then other people have to put in their sweat, you know. So we built these 2 storage sheds right next to the back of the office. So now that we don't have to pay someplace else to keep our stuff, we have it right there.
Nice.
So,
Amy, did you want to say anything else? I saw you wanting to speak for a couple times, or do you feel like you've expressed it in the chat?
Oh, I just, yeah, I think I did put it in the chat. Just there's that, expression within UU circles, moving at the speed of church. Just we tend to move. I mean, things happen, but they do, they usually have to go through, several committees, or in my experience, it seems to take a minute to go from concept to full-fledged creation. So
How many committees would it have to go to have a conversation about speeding up that process?
oh, it'd just be one
Yeah,
committee
right?
working with the board, just one,
Yeah.
like we could bring it up in the climate committee and say, okay, we want to do this. And we look, I mean, I've already done it. So if
Gotcha.
anybody wants to come over and see how I did it, they can do that. And then we take it to the board and say, this is what we want to do. This is what we think is about what it's going to cost. And it'd be really good because then we'd have water here. If there was a disaster, you always have water then,
Yeah.
And
Perfect. That goes right in that perfectly into our next slide. What you just said there at the end there is, what will you provide during times of disaster? Another offer for resilient hubs. Some possibilities are sheltering, food storage, preparation, or distribution. I know during the COVID crisis, Bayside Community Hall was acting as like a food distribution site, and also a site where there were being meals made there and delivered to individuals sheltering in place. So donation management. I know that Pay It Forward Humboldt does a lot of donation management. I'm not exactly totally sure like where their sites are, but that's a big thing. And after talking to Andrew from the Red Cross, he said that he made a comment that I thought was funny, was that like the donations can be the second disaster, because so many people are donating items and then suddenly you have this onslaught of items and nowhere to put them. So considering, using a certain space to be that place where you can take in donations, process them, manage them. Wi-Fi access, if there's a mass power outage for days and people are needing to attend a Zoom meeting or do a conference, is your facility a place where they could go and use your Wi-Fi because maybe you'll have internet or power, and that too, a power source. A community gathering point, offering childcare, generators, batteries, things like that. And then once you kind of decide what it is you want to provide for a disaster, are you prepared? Do you have a plan and action so that when something goes down, you don't need to gather, a bunch of people and go through committees or processes, but you're just ready to go. You have
Right.
things like that. And so I'm curious, you had kind of briefly touched on some things that you do during disasters, but I'm curious if you have any like absolute definite things that like, if needed, I could access tomorrow, or, a community member could access that service tomorrow if something happened. Like, is there anything like that in place?
well, I would think that would be the board's job to establish a plan of action. They could get, help, they could get, they could say, to ask somebody else to help them, but I think that's,
I think the simplest answer would be no, not yet, but it is something to put great thought into.
right.
Definitely.
We got to bring it up that this is something that we need, especially, with disasters coming, we have to be ready, so we need to keep talking about it.
You have mentioned like committees and boards. I'm curious, like what are all your committees exactly? Like what's the organizational structure look like?
Oh my God.
It's big. If it's too complicated.
There's so many. There's climate, there's social action, there's a caring circle, which is normally tasked with, offering short-term things like rides and meal preparations, making phone calls, sending cards, real kind of person-to-person stuff. There's grounds committee, there is RE, which is, you know, our children and families stuff. There's fellowship engagement there. I mean, there's really, and there's a
The
bunch I'm
worship
forgetting right now.
committee.
Yeah, there's a lot of committees.
And there's certain things
Well,
that
it's
committees,
Reflections.
certain things that committees can take the initiative and do themselves, but there are other things that that the committees have to go before the board to get approval to do. So,
Gotcha. So that's where it can kind of get complicated, and where things start to
It
take a while
can.
to implement is
it
when you
can-
have to go through these processes.
which is
Yeah.
why I think it would be great
Well,
if
it's
we
great.
could
I mean, it's great that you have. Go ahead. You think it would be great if what?
I was just gonna say, I think that that's why we, you know, need to put some thought and some discussion into having something where if there was a genuine emergency, that it could be implemented faster than waiting till when the board meets next month, you know?
And I would bet that
Yeah.
some people
I did that.
already have it together, I would not be surprised.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, or one thing we do in Cooperation Humboldt is because we also have several, we have the food team, we have the care and wellness team, we have the disaster team, we have the arts and culture team, and within those team exists even more teams. But one thing we do is we have a platform in which we all communicate on, and so I can open up this platform and I can see all the groups, all the projects, and I can access everything right there. And so that way it really closes those gaps of communication and makes that it speeds that up. So if I need to talk about a certain project or to a certain group, I can go right there, message everyone in that group, everyone in that project, and boom, there my message is sent right there. And as soon as they check it, they see it.
Platform
And
do
they
you
can
guys
respond
use?
right there.
Sorry.
It's called Slack.
You use Slack. Okay, cool.
Is it
Yeah,
is it something through Mac, or is it available to is it
so
available to everyone?
it's available on multiple. It's available. There's an app on the computer. There's an app on the phone, and you can also just access it through a website. And I know that there's other forum platforms. I guess my point being is we transitioned to Slack with I think it was a year or so ago, and at first there was a little bit of resistance because some people are like, I'm not good with technology, this is new, I don't like things that are new and that I don't understand. But making this transition has really bridged a lot of those gaps of kind of exactly what you're saying, like that time that it takes for everyone to communicate with one another. It really speeds that process up. And I think that that's really important because like I said, it's great that you have so many committees. That's amazing because it means you're doing so many amazing things. But when everyone in the committee is a different person and you suddenly have, and everyone is on their own wavelength of what they're doing, it can kind of generate a lag in information sharing. So something to consider there. So yeah, and then the next point, the next topic of under offerings is using your actual community center. And now that we've COVID came and we learned that a community center doesn't just mean a physical location. It can be virtual. And the more that you create these platforms of communication, the more that your community center becomes bigger than a place. Like Cooperation Humboldt, we have an office, but it's actually never used. It really isn't. Our office is really has become the online platform. And I'm not saying that's something that's necessary, but it is an example of how a community center does not necessarily have to be a place. In your case, you do have a place, and that's amazing because it sounds like you have a really great location. And at this location, there can be programs for the community. It can be a meeting place during times of disaster. Maybe you make it known to the Bayside community that if something really, if there's a tsunami, if there's I don't know what, a fire. I'm not sure if the fire would come out that way, but you know what I mean? You make it known that HUUF is a safe place to come and that someone will be there. Maybe it's another committee you could have is disaster response committee. So yeah, and offering skill shares at your site. So maybe, for example, like if you do bring forward to build a rainwater catchment, and that's something that your organization moves forward to, maybe put out an offering to the community and say, learn how to build a rainwater catchment. And so like while you're implementing it in your organization, people can learn. I know for Cooperation Humboldt, we're building like a fence at one of our, like we bought a plot of land and we're going to use it as like a parking space and a little like storage space, and they're building a fence there. And so they put out an offering to the community of learn how to build a fence. And so through the process, they're going to teach people. So things like that. And it sounds like you were kind of already doing some skill shares in the past. So that's awesome. And yeah, just other various educational offerings. It's always good. Like as a resilient hub, you are a source of strength for your community, and your community is an extension of your organization. And so you want to constantly be offering ways for your, that extension of your organization to grow and develop and learn and better itself, because people make up the community, and when people become stronger, the community becomes stronger. And then social justice workshops. We're in a period of time where, that's very important. A lot of people, they need that education around that. It's not something that's easily accessible in just the broad community. And that's part of the reason why we have the problems that we do around like racism or sexism and things like that, or just a lack of understanding of how the social justice system works. And then youth mentorship. And Scarlett, you're here. I'm not sure how, but I know that I believe that you were the individual mentioned around the youth component of HUUF, which I'm personally really curious about, because I actually do a lot of work with youth in the community. And can I pick your brain about that for a moment? Mm-hmm. If you're there.
If she's here, I know I can text her and see if she may have.
Yeah, isn't she the teen? She's worked with the teens.
She is, and it's also a role that she has taken over during COVID. So we struggle. There's a real kind of, and it's true of many congregations. There's something that happens right around that kind of tween age, right? 11, 12, where that's when we typically, they're just not as interested in the kinds of things that we have been offering them. Mm-hmm. And so before COVID, we had watched kind of the numbers within our youth group, if you will, dwindle. And it was something that we were kind of grappling with and trying to troubleshoot. And, well, can we connect more with the university? And, what would that look like to really create a vital space? And even, what would it look like if there was a huge social justice component, if that was kind of the thrust. Anyway, so we were already struggling to create a really vital space for teens and youth before COVID. And then Scarlett has stepped in to hold that space during COVID. So there's been kind of just layers of challenges there, but yeah, we're very open to input and feedback and to hear what's working for other people in the community in that regard.
We do have a teen room,
Mm-hmm. Oh, we have no shortage of spaces. Yeah, if people want to come and be in a great, welcoming physical space, we have no shortage of that. It's just creating the opportunities where they actually want to come and gather inside of those spaces.
I just want to say that that's so good to know, because COVID will there will be a time again when we're able to convene in spaces. It has to happen. I hope so. And so and there's so much momentum going on right now around like groups that want to meet and or programs that want to come together, but it's so difficult to do that without the physical space. That's just that magic ingredient that really makes things project. And so knowing that that is something that is available, I think is really valuable moving forward. I want to, this is such an amazing discussion. I do want to note the time that we have 15 minutes left. I'm willing to stay later, but I don't want to keep you all here all night. So I want to move through this. because we have a couple more slides left, and I really want to get to the end, which is where we kind of develop like some next steps for your organization. So yeah, so the other component is community engagements and partnerships. So working together with our other organizations in the community. I mean, that's why we're here now, is because Cooperation Humboldt and HUUF are collaborating with one another and sharing resources, and we're here offering information, but you're also here. Like, the reason I'm asking these questions and gathering this information is because I'm really noting like what it is that your organization does, because we're really trying to like map the community and like connect resources, make connections, like, oh, you do this, they need this, like, perfect, you know, things like that, and help develop those networks. And so do you find that your organization does a lot of collaboration with other communities, organizations? Not so much? I'm seeing a head shake from me.
To some degree, to the degree that we have fundraised, and maybe Joanna, you would have more input, or Amy, but from what I've observed,
Well, we used to have the mushroom people that would use our hall, and, you know, a whole bunch of different people, you know.
yeah, but
different
that wasn't collaboration so much.
Yeah.
No, that
More
wasn't
like renting out the
collaboration.
hall space.
Yeah.
I would say as far as like developing true symbiotic,
Yeah,
long-term partnerships and relationships, this is something that we haven't really explored.
We wanted it, you know, but, you know, we were kind of here by ourselves. There's no other UU congregation nearby. So, you know, but we have worked with the Methodist Church in Eureka. We have worked, you know, a while back, probably 2-3 years ago, we helped with a lawyer that's in our fellowship, and other people volunteered to be. We used another church that had big space right downtown, that we could get Hispanic people to come in and teach them how to talk to ICE if they came to their house. You know, how to keep calm and what to say and all that stuff. And so we have done some collaboration on that, but that hasn't happened for a while, but we have done that in the past.
Gotcha. Yeah. From my experience with Cooperation Humboldt, we do so much in like collaboration with organizations, and I think it's a really important component, because like a big thing we learned is, you know, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. You know, if there's an organization that's doing something and they're doing it well, how can we help them do it better? How can we support them doing that? Because for us to just do the same thing, you know, cooperation will then turn into competition. And
Yeah.
that's, you know, we don't need that, and we don't want that. And so yeah, really establishing those relationships. And even if the extent of the relationship is like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, cool, this is what we're doing. All right, none of those things cross, that's fine, but good to know, you know, like really taking inventory and like being aware of each other, I find is like a really valuable asset. So maybe, yeah, would you have like, what committee would that fall under, about like, yeah, like would that be like the social action committee, social outreach committee?
There's
To
no
some-
real,
not
some
sure.
degree.
it just would be people wanting it to happen. And I know that there is a desire for it to happen, and we have talked about it, you know, but who do we collaborate with, you know? And we have collaborated with some churches around here, you know, and
Well, it seems to me that the current model is we have a lot of people who are members and even leaders within the congregation that are actively involved in other community organizations. And so there's
totally.
like, okay, well, they're a member here and they're also active there, but there's never really a feeling of that true kind of synthesis of the two coming together. So I think, yeah, it's just another opportunity to see what would be possible if we did more integration rather than that kind of peripheral thing.
Also, I know with the Social Action Committee, when it was functioning pre-COVID, that if people brought issues to us, we could work on them. If any of our members were acquainted with certain issues, they would bring it up in meeting. But we didn't go out. It wasn't so much going out and as a committee, or as a fellowship, going out and searching for how to establish these
Right.
collaboration.
It sounds to me like you wouldn't even have to go that far. Like it sounds like what Amy said. There's a bunch of everyone who's a member of the HUUF organization is like, not everyone, but a lot of people are also part of other organizations. So
Exactly.
I'm imagining like really coming together as organization or as fellowship members and being like, what are you a part of? Like, what is your organization doing? And really having a conversation, not as HUUF fellowship members, but as community members who are part of other things and who are brought together by HUUF, and then really like exchanging knowledge around that. I'm really curious
Yes.
what a process like that would look like, because I think that like you wouldn't, like you said, you wouldn't have to go out anywhere. You would actually do the opposite. You'd go internally and see what's going on within.
We have had closer relationship with the community at large in the past when there was when there were people that were spearheading that we've worked with True North, we've worked with AHA, and a number of other, but that was when our previous minister, brought these things in and got us, involved with them.
Yeah. And, that ties back to one of our first points, one of the very first steps of how to build a resilient hub, and that is having a dedicated team. And so it sounds like when you had a minister that was really dedicated and active, that things like that were happening. And so I think that, yeah, you said you are out a minister. Is there a plan or?
Yes, there's a team working on getting a new minister.
That's cool. Yeah. How do you
I
feel?
mean, it's a temporary team, but they already did it recently to bring Anthony in, and then Anthony left us. So yeah, so they're looking, but it's through the UUA, is where we find people.
Amy, you have a thought or something to add?
Well, I don't want to take up too much time, but I mean, so a lot has been said about our previous minister, who was very, very active in, all different corners of the community. I mean, I think even not too long ago, he received some kind of an award because of just all the things that he and his wife had been doing as far as
about Brian.
Yeah. And so one thing about that, and it's been an ongoing discussion about, I mean, it's great that we're looking for that next person who will be a pivotal piece of our leadership and, spreading our mission, our vision, and seeing that go forward. But a big part of that conversation has been like, then it kind of is leaving it hinging on one energetic, charismatic individual. And it really needs to be carried by all of us, know? Yeah.
And that's like while you were saying that, I was just thinking and like having that thought. And so even just thinking like, okay, disaster preparedness. If you're a church and you lose your minister, that's classifies as a disaster. And so to be resilient is exactly kind of what Amy's saying, is like it shouldn't all depend on one minister. A minister should be obviously an important role, but there should be empowerment within the committees and with the groups and with the individuals within those groups.
Yeah, the worship committee plans things out 6 months ahead of time. So they're always going, and they keep the services are what's really keeping us going right now.
Oh, it's true.
The Sunday service, the Zoom, it's just
that and the weekly service. I mean, the weekly Zooms.
Oh yeah, we got book readings and reflections and
poetry groups and
poetry all time. And then just one just on the pandemic, just it's about how you doing, and there's lots of different Zooms during the week.
And then our choir struggles on week after week, mostly meeting outside in the cold.
So I'm loving this conversation, and I'm finding that you are all doing, your organization is doing so much, but that there's also still so much that it seems you want to do, and some places that you are finding, you know, you're identifying where there are not weaknesses, I don't want to use that term, but ways that you could become stronger. And I think that that's really important moving forward. And so I really want to kind of like outline, I guess, the conversation that we've had throughout these 90 minutes, and think like what are some tangible things that you've gotten from this discussion that you feel like you really want to move forward with. I one specific mention I heard you mention the rainwater catchment and catchment. Is that something that you could actually see your, like, someone bringing forward as an improvement, or does that seem like not a priority now, or where does that fall?
Well, I could just, send David Marshak an email saying
Okay.
this is something that we're thinking about doing. It'd be really great to have,
Mhm.
and can they, bring it before the board and,
Okay.
uh,
Any other thoughts? That was just the first one off the top of my head.
I mean,
but
I've got pictures of my rainwater catchment. I just send them the picture of what it looks like and, all that.
I have had rainwater catchment in Hawaii before and in New Zealand actually too. So I've had a bit of experience with, what's out there and what's available and what to do with it.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to see something happen with gardens, but that's something that's for a little bit later in the year, but it would be something good to start thinking about now.
And that's something that I remember there was mention about, like, difficulty finding someone to be committed to a garden, and that's understandable. But
I think the key thing is that it should never be one person
totally,
that's
yeah.
committed to the
Has
garden.
to be 3 people.
There should be at least 3 people, that are going to take turns, that, divvy up, the workload and the responsibility for it and putting it together and caring for it and all of that. Yeah.
That could also be something where you bring into, like, partnerships with the community. So maybe
Could
you
be.
maybe you find a group within the community that wants to, they can utilize the space in exchange for their commitment to take care of it. And HUUF will obviously have access to it, but it's like they're the ones maybe spearheading the movement.
We're right next door to Redwood Roots Farm, so there could be some good conversations possibly there. I don't know what's possible.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and then I feel like there's so much content here and so much, so many ideas. I'm wondering, like, how we can bring this conversation to maybe like a broader audience, or more people, like bring more people into this discussion.
Do you mean within HUUF or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just got the newsletter today. I don't know if it was in the newsletter.
Yeah, I think we're at the point with this sort of thing where, there's that idea that rather than sending out just kind of broadcasting information, a lot of times you can get much more effectiveness or much more commitment by one-on-one individual invites. And so I think we might be at that place once there's some clarity around what the desires are, what the next steps, the hopes, the dreams, as far as this goes. I think it might be reaching out to start, maybe it's the various chairs of our committees, or I think we're there. We're ready to do some one-on-one invites to people.
And the community is in one state, the people of the community are in one stage or another of vaccinations right now. So all of this could really positively change at some point, not in the not too far distant future.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, if you need any assistance or help facilitating a conversation like that, or like just kind of exactly like what I did here today, that's something that we want to be like a resource of, and like I want to help like be a part of that conversation, because I'm inspired by the work you're doing. I want to learn from the work you're doing, and I want to be able to share any like knowledge or connections or understanding that I have that I can maybe bring forward to the conversation, even if it's as simple as like being a facilitator to a discussion. Because it's almost 7:30, and I feel like I'm right now at the point where I am like ready to start diving.
Well, talk to the worship committee and get Cooperation Humboldt on their on their list of speakers.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah,
I know David.
yeah, I'm
David
open to anything that
Oh no, I was just gonna say David came.
and I'm also really
to us.
interested in connecting with
Sorry, Sabrina, please do go ahead.
well, yeah, well, I would love to also, like, I know David is a certain type of person and I'm a certain type of person, and maybe getting like, and Oscar's a certain type of person, and getting more different types of faces in a group can, connect with people in different ways. I know I'm not sure if Scarlett's here, but I'm really interested in like exploring, what it would look like to mobilize youth in this way. I think that there's so much potential there, and it's seeming like that's a part of, hey, you're back. It's seeming like that's a part that there could be some more discussion around that. And so yeah.
Yeah, on that conversation, I'll just say the teens are not as motivated as we would want them to be at this time, but hopefully in the future, as things become more normalized, we can hope to give them these opportunities.
Totally. So I actually work at the Youth Service Bureau and the Raven Project. So like I know a thing or two about teens and their resistance towards a certain, organization, and just doing things that aren't as cool as, they think it is. But
another way that we work with other people in the community is Our Whole Lives, AL. That's on basically teaching every teens and even down to kindergartners. It starts, about their own sexuality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in our classroom for very young people, they've got penis and vagina and everything right there. It's right there. Nothing secret, nothing. But it's called Our Whole Lives, and it's a really great program for young people and teenagers, so they learn what's appropriate around the sexuality.
Yeah. Well, a big thing I've found with teens is that like especially at risk youth, is that like really lacking that that feeling of like meaning in their community, that like connection with community, that feeling of like meaningful work. And that's difficult to find as a teenager. Like, teens apply for jobs. What do they apply for? Like McDonald's, Carl's Jr., Target. Not, those jobs are great, but they're not going to ground a teen who's like at risk and looking for meaning and purpose in life. And so a lot of the things that we discussed today are things that like getting youth involved in that discussion could give them that, that grounding sense of meaning and purpose. And so my thoughts around that are very deep and very large. But it's 7:31, so I want to respect everyone's time, and I'm hoping that that you feel like you got a lot out of this conversation, and that we'll all be walking away from this with maybe some thoughts and brainstorms about like what it is that we're going to do next. How do you all feel?
That's great.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Sabrina, could you speak a little bit more about the I think we're
Any
half
last
through this?
reflections before we close this group?